In the autumn of 1932, Dr. Samuel Hartwell was summoned to a remote cabin deep in the Arkansas Ozarks, where he would witness what medical journals would later classify as the most genetically compromised birth in recorded American history. The patient was 10 years old. The father was her own grandfather. What Dr. Hartwell documented in his private medical files, records that were sealed for nearly 90 years, revealed a bloodline so twisted that it defied natural law itself. Before we delve into these forbidden medical records, subscribe and comment which state you're watching from. Your support helps preserve these dark chapters of American history. Dr. Samuel Hartwell had practiced medicine in the Arkansas backwoods for over 2 decades when the call came on October 13, 1932. A man named Ezekiel Crowthorne had ridden 15 miles through treacherous mountain paths to fetch the only doctor within a 100-mile radius. The message was simple but urgent. A child was in labor, and something was terribly wrong. Hartwell's medical journal, discovered in 2019 during an estate sale, provides a harrowing account of what he found at the Crowthorne homestead. The property sat in a hollow so remote that it appeared on no official maps, accessible only by a narrow trail that wound through dense forest and across 3 unmarked creek beds. As Hartwell approached the compound, he noted an unsettling architectural anomaly. The main house had been built in a perfect circle, with 7 smaller cabins arranged around it like points on a compass rose. The patient was a girl named Mercy Crowthorne, barely 4 feet tall and weighing perhaps 60 pounds. But it wasn't her size that disturbed Dr. Hartwell. It was her face. In his notes he wrote, "The child exhibits severe prognathism, eyes set unnaturally close together, and what appears to be a partially cleft palate that has healed incorrectly. Most disturbing are her hands, 6 fingers on each, with the additional digits appearing fully functional." As Hartwell examined Mercy, the truth began to emerge. She was not only pregnant, but had been so for nearly 11 months, an impossibly long gestation period that should have been medically catastrophic. When he questioned the family about the father, the assembled Crowthornes exchanged glances that spoke of secrets buried deeper than the mountain graves that dotted their property. It was Josiah Crowthorne, the family patriarch, who finally spoke the truth that would haunt Dr. Hartwell for the rest of his life. Josiah was 83 years old, a gaunt figure with the same unsettling facial features that marked his entire bloodline. His confession, recorded verbatim in Hartwell's journal, was delivered with a matter-of-fact tone that made it all the more chilling. "Doctor, that child carries my seed," Josiah stated without a trace of shame. "Just as my granddaughter Clara carries it, and my great-granddaughter Ruth. It's been the way of our family for nigh on 60 years now. The blood must stay pure, you understand? The outside world brings weakness." Hartwell's medical training had prepared him for many horrors, but nothing had prepared him for this. As he continued his examination of Mercy, he discovered that her pregnancy was not just the result of incest. It was the culmination of 3 generations of systematic inbreeding orchestrated by Josiah Crowthorne himself. The old man had been breeding his own descendants like livestock, selecting for what he called the old traits, characteristics that Hartwell recognized as severe genetic deformities. The birth itself was a nightmare that Hartwell would never fully document in official records. The child that emerged after 18 hours of labor was barely recognizable as human. In his private notes, sealed away until his death in 1967, Hartwell wrote, "The infant exhibits multiple severe deformities, cyclopia, with a single eye positioned above a proboscis-like appendage where the nose should be. The skull is drastically malformed, appearing almost conical. Most disturbing of all, the child appears to possess what can only be described as vestigial limbs, 4 arm-like appendages of varying lengths, none fully formed." But the true horror was yet to come, because as Dr. Hartwell would soon discover, Mercy Crowthorne was not the only child bearing her grandfather's offspring. 3 weeks after the birth, Hartwell made a decision that would consume the rest of his life. He returned to the Crowthorne compound, this time bringing with him a federal census enumerator named Thomas Wickham. What Wickham documented in his field notes, notes that were mysteriously omitted from the official 1930 census, revealed the full scope of the Crowthorne family's genetic catastrophe. The compound housed 47 individuals, all bearing the Crowthorne surname, all exhibiting varying degrees of genetic abnormality. Wickham's census forms, discovered in 2003 in a box of water-damaged documents in the Arkansas State Archives, paint a picture of a family tree that had collapsed in on itself like a diseased root system. Josiah Crowthorne sat at the center of this genetic web, having fathered children with his own daughters, granddaughters, and great-granddaughters. The family records, kept in Josiah's own hand in a leather-bound ledger, read like a breeder's log for prize cattle. Clara, age 16, delivered male, 6-fingered, hair-lip moderate. Good strong back for work. Will breed again come spring. Another entry. Ruth, age 14, lost child to breathing sickness. Skull too soft. Will try again with different positioning. Wickham noted that many of the Crowthorne children could not speak, communicating instead through a system of grunts and gestures that seemed to be understood throughout the compound. Others exhibited severe intellectual disabilities, staring blankly at visitors with eyes that reflected no recognition or understanding. Most disturbing were those he classified as the Watchers, children and adults who would position themselves at windows and doorways, observing the outside world with an intensity that suggested predatory intelligence. The census enumerator's final entry in his field notes was perhaps the most chilling. I have counted 17 pregnant females in this compound, ranging in age from 11 to 42. All claim the same father. When I attempted to interview the oldest woman about her pregnancies, she told me she had birthed 23 babies for the patriarch. When I asked what happened to those children, she pointed to a grove of unmarked graves beyond the cornfield and said only, "The weak ones go to ground." The infant born to Mercy Crowthorne lived for exactly 7 days. When it died, Dr. Hartwell made the most controversial decision of his career. He secretly removed the body for autopsy, telling the Crowthornes that he needed to examine it for medical purposes. What he discovered in his makeshift laboratory would change his understanding of human genetics forever. Working alongside Dr. Elena Morrison, a pathologist from Little Rock who had agreed to assist under conditions of absolute secrecy, Hartwell performed what may have been the first genetic analysis of extreme inbreeding effects in American medical history. Dr. Morrison's autopsy report, locked away in her personal files until her death in 1981, documented abnormalities that pushed the boundaries of human biological possibility. The subject exhibits chromosomal abnormalities consistent with at least 4 generations of direct inbreeding, Morrison wrote. The degree of homozygosity is unlike anything in medical literature. Most remarkable is the presence of vestigial structures that suggest evolutionary regression. Primitive gill-like slits along the neck, a pronounced coccyx that resembles a rudimentary tail, and dental patterns that appear almost pre-human in their arrangement. But it was Morrison's final observation that would haunt both doctors for the rest of their lives. Deep within the infant's brain and tissue, she discovered structures that she could only describe as additional neural pathways, brain formations that didn't match any known human anatomy. In her private notes, she speculated that the extreme inbreeding had not only produced deformities, but had somehow activated dormant genetic codes, creating something that was no longer entirely human. The doctor's secret was nearly exposed when federal authorities arrived at the Crowthorne compound 6 months later, following reports from local residents about strange sounds coming from the hollow during full moons. What the investigators found would be classified as a federal matter and sealed from public record for the next 50 years. FBI agent Marcus Holloway's classified report, declassified in 1982 through a Freedom of Information Act request, provides the most comprehensive account of the Crowthorne compound during its final months. Holloway had been dispatched to investigate reports of ritualistic activities and unnatural births that had reached the attention of federal authorities through a network of concerned local physicians What Holloway discovered was a family that had evolved beyond the boundaries of normal human society. The compound operated under its own set of laws, governed by Josiah Crowthorne's twisted interpretation of genetic purity. The circular arrangement of the buildings, Holloway realized, was not merely architectural, it was ritualistic. Each cabin housed a different breeding group, with the main house serving as a nursery for the most recent offspring. Holloway's report documented the presence of 31 children and adolescents, many exhibiting severe physical and mental abnormalities. But what disturbed the agent most was not the obvious signs of inbreeding. It was the behavior of the family members themselves. They moved in perfect synchronization, as if guided by some collective consciousness. When one child would cry, all the others would fall silent. When Josiah spoke, every member of the family would turn to face him simultaneously, regardless of where they were positioned. The agent's most chilling observation came during his interview with a 12-year-old girl named Constance Crowthorne. When asked about her family, she replied, "We are one blood, one mind, one purpose. The patriarch tells us we are becoming something new, something better than the outside people. We can feel each other's thoughts now. Soon, we won't need words at all." Holloway's investigation was cut short when he made a discovery that would change the federal response to the Crowthorne situation entirely. Hidden beneath the main house, accessed through a concealed entrance in the kitchen floor, was a chamber that defied explanation. The walls were covered in symbols that appeared to be carved from the inside, suggesting they had been made by fingernails or crude tools. But it was what lay in the center of the chamber that forced the government to escalate their intervention. The ground chamber beneath the Crowthorne house measured approximately 15 feet in diameter and had been carved directly from the mountain bedrock. FBI photographs, finally released in 1995, show a circular room with a raised stone platform in the center, surrounded by what appear to be carved channels that had been stained dark with dried blood. Along the walls, Holloway counted 47 small alcoves, each containing what his report described as organic materials of unknown origin. Later analysis would reveal that these alcoves contained preserved human tissue, samples from every child born in the compound over the past 3 decades. Josiah Crowthorne had been conducting his own form of genetic record-keeping, preserving pieces of each birth to track the progression of what he called the purification. But the most disturbing discovery was a series of journals hidden within the chamber walls. Written in Josiah's hand, these books detailed not just the breeding program, but his ultimate goal. The final entry, dated just 1 week before the FBI raid, read, "The time of separation is ending. We have bred true for 4 generations now. The outside blood grows weaker while ours grows stronger. Soon we will be ready to reclaim what was taken from us. The old ones promised this day would come, when the pure blood would rise again and the corrupted world would bow before the true children of the mountain." The journals revealed that Josiah believed his family was evolving into something beyond human, a superior species that would eventually replace what he saw as the mongrel races of the outside world. The extreme inbreeding was not accidental, but intentional, designed to concentrate what Josiah called the old blood, genetic material that he believed connected his family to something ancient and powerful. Agent Holloway's final report recommended immediate federal intervention, but by the time reinforcements arrived, the Crowthorne compound was empty. Every member of the family had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the evidence of their genetic experimentation and a series of fresh graves in the family cemetery. The disappearance of the Crowthorne family remains one of the most puzzling cases in FBI history. On the morning of March 15, 1933, a team of federal agents and Arkansas state troopers surrounded the compound, expecting to arrest Josiah Crowthorne and document the full extent of his breeding program. Instead, they found buildings that appeared to have been abandoned for weeks, despite reports from local residents of activity as recently as the previous night. The agents' search revealed signs of hasty departure, meals left half-eaten on tables, clothes scattered on floors, and most mysteriously, the breeding chamber beneath the main house had been completely cleared. Every journal, Every preserved tissue sample, every piece of evidence had been removed with surgical precision. Only the blood-stained platform remained, along with a single message carved into the stone: "We go to prepare the way." Local tracker Jim Bastrop was brought in to follow any trail the family might have left. His report, filed with the Arkansas State Police, described finding footprints that led from the compound toward the deepest part of the Ozark Mountains, an area so remote and treacherous that even experienced hunters avoided it. But what made Bastrop's report truly unsettling was his description of the tracks themselves. "I've been tracking in these mountains for 30 years, Bastrop wrote, "and I've never seen prints like these. They start out looking human enough, but the deeper we followed them into the forest, the more different they became. By the time we reached the old mine shaft, some of the prints looked more like animal tracks than human footprints, and there were too many of them, way more than 47 people should have made." The trail ended at an abandoned copper mine that had been sealed in the 1890s after a series of unexplained accidents. When authorities broke through the sealed entrance, they found that the mine shaft descended far deeper than any of the original mining records indicated. More disturbing, the walls of the deeper tunnels showed signs of recent excavation, as if someone had been expanding the underground network for decades. The mystery of the Crowthorne family might have remained unsolved if not for the meticulous record-keeping of Elijah Morse, the county coroner who had been quietly documenting unusual deaths in the Arkansas backwoods for over 40 years. Morse's private files, discovered after his death in 1958, contained detailed accounts of births and deaths that had never been officially reported, including dozens of cases connected to the Crowthorne bloodline. Morse's records revealed that the Crowthorne breeding program had been active since at least 1875, when Josiah's grandfather, Silas Crowthorne, had first established the compound. Generation after generation, the family had been systematically interbreeding, with each generation producing children more physically and mentally compromised than the last. But Morse had documented something that even Dr. Hartwell and Agent Holloway had missed. The pattern was accelerating. "Each generation breeds true faster than the last," Morse wrote in his final entry about the Crowthorns. "Where it once took 3 or 4 generations to see the worst effects, now the children are born already carrying the full weight of their corrupted blood. But there's something else happening, something that defies medical explanation. The newest children aren't just deformed, they're changing in ways that suggest their bodies are adapting to something we don't understand." Morse's files contained photographs that he had taken in secret during his visits to the compound. These images, too disturbing to be included in official records, showed children with bone structures that appeared to be evolving away from human norms. Some exhibited elongated skulls that seemed designed to house larger brains. Others had developed additional joints in their limbs, allowing for a range of motion that bordered on the impossible. But the most significant discovery in Morse's files was a letter he had received from Dr. Hartwell just days before the federal raid. In it, Hartwell revealed that he had continued to monitor the Crowthorne family in secret, and what he had observed in the months following Mercy's birth had convinced him that something far more sinister than simple inbreeding was taking place. Dr. Hartwell's letter to Coroner Morse, dated March the 10th, 1933, contained revelations that cast the entire Crowthorne case in a new and terrifying light. The doctor had been conducting covert observations of the compound, using field glasses to monitor the family's activities from a hidden position in the surrounding forest. What he witnessed during those long nights of surveillance shattered his scientific understanding of human biology. "Elijah," Hartwell wrote, "what I am about to tell you will sound like the ravings of a madman, but I swear on my medical oath that every word is true. The Crowthorne children are not merely deformed, they are becoming something else entirely. I have watched them move through the darkness with a coordination that defies their apparent disabilities. They communicate without speaking, hunt without tools, and demonstrate a collective intelligence that operates beyond individual consciousness." Hartwell's letter detailed incidents that bordered on the supernatural. He described watching Crowthorne children scale the sheer rock face of the mountain hollow with impossible ease, their malformed limbs somehow perfectly adapted for climbing. He had observed them catching small animals with their bare hands, moving with a predatory precision that seemed to operate on pure instinct. Most disturbing was Hartwell's account of what he called the gathering nights. During the new moon, the entire Crowthorne family would emerge from their buildings and arrange themselves in a perfect circle around the compound. They would remain motionless for hours, their faces turned toward the sky, as if listening to something that only they could hear. Hartwell noted that on these nights, all wildlife in the surrounding area would fall completely silent. "I believe," Hartwell concluded his letter, "that Josiah Crowthorne has succeeded in breeding something that is no longer human. Whether through pure genetic manipulation or some other means I cannot fathom, his family has become a new species, one that views the rest of humanity as either prey or competition. The federal authorities must be warned that they are not dealing with ordinary criminals, but with something that may pose a threat to our very survival as a species." The letter ended with a chilling postscript. "If you are reading this, then I am likely already dead. They know I have been watching them. Last night, I saw them gathered at the edge of my property. They were not afraid of me. They were studying me, learning from me. God help us all if they decide we are no longer useful to their plans." Dr. Hartwell's body was found in his home on March 20th, 1933, 5 days after the Crowthorne family vanished. The official cause of death was listed as heart failure, but Coroner Morse's private notes suggest something far more sinister. The doctor's body showed no signs of violence, yet Morse noted several anomalies that he chose not to include in his official report. "Dr. Hartwell's corpse exhibits an expression of absolute terror that I have never seen on a deceased person," Morse wrote. "His eyes remain wide open, staring at the ceiling, and his hands are clenched so tightly that his fingernails have drawn blood from his palms. Most disturbing, his hair has turned completely white, something that typically occurs over months or years, not in the span of a few days." The case remained dormant for decades until 1987, when geneticist Dr. Sarah Chen began researching historical instances of extreme inbreeding for her doctoral thesis at the University of Arkansas. Chen's investigation into the Crowthorne family led her to attempt a genetic analysis of tissue samples that had been preserved from the 1933 investigation. What she discovered challenged everything she thought she knew about human genetics. "The DNA samples from the Crowthorne family show chromosomal structures that I've never encountered before," Chen wrote in her research notes. "The degree of homozygosity should have been lethal, yet somehow these individuals not only survived, but appeared to be thriving in their isolated environment. More puzzling, there are genetic markers present that don't match any known human haplogroups. It's as if their DNA contains elements that predate modern human genetic development." Chen's research was abruptly terminated in 1989 when her funding was mysteriously withdrawn. Her research materials were confiscated by federal authorities, and she was required to sign a non-disclosure agreement that prevented her from publishing her findings. When contacted by journalists in 2010, Chen would only say, "Some secrets are buried for good reason. The Crowthorne case should be left undisturbed." Despite the official silence surrounding the Crowthorne case, reports of unusual activity in the Arkansas Ozarks have persisted for nearly 90 years. Local residents speak in whispers of pale figures glimpsed in the deep forest, moving with inhuman grace through terrain that would challenge experienced hikers. Hunters describe finding animal carcasses arranged in ritualistic patterns, and hikers report hearing sounds in the night that seem almost human, but carry an undertone of something far more primitive. In 1995, a team of cave explorers investigating the old copper mine where the Crowthorne Trail had ended made a discovery that forced authorities to seal the area permanently. Deep within the mine's extended tunnel system, they found evidence of recent habitation, sleeping areas carved into the rock, primitive tools fashioned from bone and stone, and walls covered with the same strange symbols that had been found in the breeding chamber beneath the original compound. Most disturbing was the explorers' report of finding nursery chambers, carefully constructed spaces that appeared designed to house small children. The walls of these chambers were covered with what appeared to be childish drawings. but the images depicted scenes that no normal child should be able to imagine. Rituals of transformation, anatomical diagrams that mixed human and animal characteristics, and star charts that showed celestial configurations unknown to modern astronomy. The exploration team's final report, classified by the Department of Interior, concluded with a recommendation that the mine be permanently sealed and the surrounding area declared off-limits to civilian access. "We believe," the team leader wrote, "that we have stumbled upon evidence of an ongoing habitation by individuals or entities unknown to modern science. For the safety of the general public, we strongly recommend that no further investigation of this site be permitted." Perhaps the most disturbing evidence that the Crowthorne bloodline may have survived comes from genetic counselor Maria Santos, who has been tracking unusual birth defects in rural Arkansas hospitals since 2003. Santos has documented a pattern of births that bear striking similarities to the historical Crowthorne case. Children born with extra digits, unusual bone structures, and genetic markers that suggest extreme inbreeding. "What concerns me," Santos told a medical conference in 2018, "is that these cases are appearing in families with no known history of consanguinity. The parents appear to be unrelated, yet their children exhibit the same genetic abnormalities we would expect from multiple generations of inbreeding. It's as if there's a hidden bloodline that has been mixing with the general population for decades." Santos's research has identified over 200 cases across Arkansas, Missouri, and Tennessee that share common genetic markers with the preserved Crowthorne tissue samples. Most disturbing is her discovery that many of these children demonstrate unusual capabilities: enhanced physical coordination, accelerated learning in certain areas, and what parents describe as an uncanny ability to communicate with each other without speaking. "I've documented cases where children from completely different families, living hundreds of miles apart, somehow know each other," Santos reported. Parents describe their children drawing pictures of places they've never been, or speaking about siblings they've never met. "When we bring these children together for testing, they interact as if they've known each other their entire lives." Federal health authorities have consistently dismissed Santos's research, claiming that the genetic similarities are coincidental and that the behavioral observations are the result of observer bias. However, Santos's private files contain evidence that suggests a coordinated effort to suppress her findings. Research grants have been mysteriously cancelled, test subjects have disappeared from follow-up studies, and several families have abruptly relocated to unknown addresses after participating in her genetic screening program. The case of Mercy Crowthorne and her monstrous offspring represents more than just a horrific example of genetic degeneracy. It stands as a testament to humanity's capacity to corrupt the very essence of life itself. In their pursuit of genetic purity, the Crowthorne family created something that was neither pure nor human, a bloodline so twisted that it defied the natural order and produced children who belonged more to nightmare than to reality. Yet perhaps the most terrifying aspect of the Crowthorne legacy is not what we know, but what remains hidden in the deep places of the Arkansas mountains. The family that vanished in 1933 left behind more than just empty buildings and unmarked graves. They left behind a genetic legacy that may still be spreading through the hidden valleys and forgotten hollows of the American backwoods. In the darkest corners of rural hospitals, in the whispered conversations of mountain folk, and in the classified files of federal agencies, the name Crowthorne still carries weight. Local people speak of children born with too many fingers, of families that live too far from civilization, and of bloodlines that have remained pure for reasons that decent folk choose not to examine too closely. The mine shafts remain sealed, the compound site has been reclaimed by forest, and the official records speak only of a family that disappeared without explanation. But in the Ozark Mountains, when the moon is dark and the night grows cold, hunters still report hearing sounds that seem almost human, the cries of children who should never have been born, calling out across the generations for their monstrous patriarch to return and complete the work he began so many years ago. Some secrets, it seems, refuse to stay buried, and some bloodlines run too deep to ever truly die.